Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, in your written testimony, you touched on how rapid inflation caused by the Biden administration weakened the defense industrial base. And I just yesterday met with Excelio, which is in my district, about that very thing. Talked about the inflation crisis and how it was especially harmful for the small businesses in the industrial base. You know, these mom and pop shops effectively had their fixed price contracts renegotiated to slash their revenue by 20% through no fault of their own. And for many companies, this means laying off staff or closing their doors. What flexibility does the DoD have to support small contractors during extreme situations like the inflation crisis that we've had, and how can Congress assist them?
Well, first, I think recognizing the impact of inflation, my observation in this job, having been in government before, is that industry is the shock absorber of inflation. The Pentagon seemed to think that it had managed through inflation because it hadn't hit it yet. When the next round of contracts or economic order quantities or competitions take place, that inflation that has been absorbed by industry is going to show up, and the government's going to have to deal with it. And I think the way that what government can do in real time, which is hard, is pay for it. The contracts, most of the contracts that are directly with the government have adjustment clauses in them. But it doesn't matter if there's no money to pay for those adjustment clauses. And that's what caused, you know, the primes, anyone who has a direct contract with the government to absorb it and then pass it down through the supply chain. And what you're seeing now is small businesses that are locked into contracts to their customer pre-inflation, but are now buying materials and parts in post-inflation, and their margins are just getting squeezed.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, and we can chase them out of the defense industrial base because they can adjust to inflation much more quickly on the non-defense side of the work that they're doing.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Norquist, in your written testimony, you talk about the burden of regulatory compliance that contractors are forced to bear in order to support our national defense. For small contractors who can't afford to devote an entire position or a department to compliance, the regulatory burden is crippling. Do you have any sort of estimates as to how much time or money the average small contractor is forced to commit in order to meet federal requirements? And you know, it seemed to me like Congress would want those resources to be focused on supporting the warfighter instead of checking the box for DoD.
So we don't have estimates in the aggregate, but individual things like the CMMC standard, how many, you know, 100,000, 200,000 are they going to have to spend to get, or just for the annual inspections? Each of those we tend to, you know, for some of them we will have estimates. But as you point out, those are all significant burdens for the small business, and it makes moving into the barrier to moving into the government sector or staying there very high.
Well, and it also takes money away from the warfighter, right? When they're spending it on compliance instead of, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you. I would yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from